My love, please don't leave. I promise to work harder for us. And the baby. Please, Zara, don't do this. Don't leave us.
Daniel, you are poor. You don't have money to take care of me. I can't continue like this.
7 years after leaving her husband and child for a richer life, Zara came back with nothing, only to discover she had lost the one thing money could never replace. Zara was not like most girls in the village. Even as a young graduate walking back through the dusty path that led to her grandmother's house, her eyes carried something different, a hunger, a fire, a belief that she was made for something greater. She had studied hard. She had passed her exams. She had worn that graduation gown with pride. But when she returned home and looked around at the quiet village life, the small houses, the early morning market noise, the women carrying heavy baskets on their heads, something inside her felt heavy. This was not the life she had imagined. This was not the story she wanted to tell about herself. Her grandmother, Mama B, was a small woman with silver hair and deep eyes that had seen too many seasons to be fooled by anything. She welcomed Zara with warm arms and a warm meal, and she spoke slowly the way old women do when they want you to really hear something. Zara, she said, stirring the pot on the fire, a tree does not grow tall in one day. But every day it is growing, even when you cannot see it. Zara smiled politely, the way young people do when they hear advice they do not yet understand. She ate, she rested, and she told herself she would not stay long. This village was temporary. This quiet life was not her destination. She was only passing through. But life had its own plans. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. And somewhere in between the market mornings and the evening breezes, Zara met Daniel. He was not the kind of man who announced himself loudly. He was the kind of man you notice quietly, the one still working when everyone else had gone home, the one who greeted every elder with respect, the one who laughed easily and meant it. He sold goods in the market during the day and helped neighbors carry loads in the evening. He had almost nothing. But the way he carried himself, you would never know it. There was a dignity in Daniel that money could not buy and poverty could not take away. Zara watched him for weeks before she admitted, even to herself, that she liked him. He was not what she had planned. He was not rich. He did not wear fine clothes or drive a car. But he was real. He was kind. And when he finally spoke to her one afternoon near the market, his voice was gentle and his words were honest. I don't have much, he told her the day he confessed his feelings, but what I have, I give completely. Zara had heard many words from many mouths. But those words, simple as they were, landed somewhere deep inside her. And just like that, without planning it, without expecting it, Zara fell in love. Before this story begins, if you love real-life stories that teach deep lessons and will open your eyes, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because this story might change how you see love, money, and the choices we make. Their love did not begin with flowers or expensive gifts. It began with conversations, long ones, sitting outside under the old mango tree behind Mama B's house, talking about life, about dreams, about the kind of people they wanted to become. Daniel listened to Zara the way very few people do, with his full attention, not waiting for his turn to speak, but genuinely curious about her thoughts. He asked her questions. He remembered everything she said. He made her feel like her words mattered. And Zara, who had always been the girl with big dreams and no one to share them with, found in Daniel something she had not expected to find in this village, a safe place. They were married in a small ceremony. There were no elaborate decorations. No grand reception hall. The chairs were plastic, borrowed from neighbors. The food was cooked by the women of the village, who sang and danced and ululated with the kind of joy that does not need money to exist. Mama B tied their hands together with a piece of cloth and prayed over them with tears in her eyes. Whatever comes, she whispered, hold each other. The wedding was simple. But the love in that compound that day was louder than any celebration Zara had ever seen. She wore a dress she had sewn herself, and Daniel looked at her like she was wearing gold. Their life together began from zero. They shared a small rented room. Daniel continued hawking in the market while Zara set up a small table where she sold a few items: spices, soap, small provisions. Some days they made enough. Some days they barely did. There were evenings when their dinner was a bowl of gari soaked in water with a little sugar, and they sat together on the floor eating it, laughing about nothing and everything. Zara would say, "Daniel, when we are rich, remind me of this gari so I don't start foaming." And Daniel would laugh so hard his whole body shook. In those moments, in that tiny room with that simple bowl between them, they were not poor. They were complete. Then came the baby. When their son was born, Daniel cried. He stood over the small bundle of life and cried without shame, the kind of tears that fall not from sadness but from something so full it has no other way out. They named him Elijah. And Elijah changed everything. The room felt warmer. The mornings felt brighter. Even the hard days felt bearable now because there was a reason sitting right there, wrapped in a small cloth, looking up at them with wide curious eyes. Daniel worked even harder after Elijah came. He started earlier and stayed later. He carried things he didn't have to carry. He took jobs he was overqualified for. Because now, it wasn't just about surviving. It was about building something for his son. It was an ordinary afternoon when Zara ran into them at the market. 3 women. Women she recognized immediately: Sasha, Bola, and Rita, her old school friends. But they were not the same girls she had studied with. These women had transformed into something that stopped conversations when they walked into a room. Their clothes were expensive. Their bags were branded. Their phones were the latest models. Their hair was perfectly done. And they smelled like money, the kind of perfume that cost more than Zara made in a month. They screamed when they saw her, hugged her, laughed, and pulled her close like no time had passed at all. They invited her to join them, just for one afternoon, they said. Just to catch up. Zara almost said no. She thought about Elijah at home, about Daniel working in the sun. But they were already pulling her by the hand, already laughing, already making her feel like she had been missing out on something. So she went. And that afternoon rewrote everything. They took her to a restaurant she had never entered, a place with cold air inside, with white plates and waiters who spoke softly and poured water into glasses before you even asked. They ordered without looking at the prices. They ate slowly, laughed loudly, and paid without flinching. They talked about trips, about shopping, about the kind of life that existed somewhere on the other side of where Zara was standing. When Zara returned home that evening, the room felt different. Not because anything in it had changed, but because something inside her had. She stood at the door for a moment and looked around. The small table. The cracked wall. The mat on the floor. The plastic bucket in the corner. And there was Daniel, sitting quietly after a long day, drinking gari by himself, still in his work clothes, with tired eyes and dusty feet. Before that day, that image had never bothered her. Before that day, she had sat beside him and shared that same cup without a second thought. But now, standing at the door with the taste of restaurant food still in her mouth, she looked at her husband and felt something she was ashamed of: embarrassment. Not because of who Daniel was, but because of what she suddenly wanted him to be. She said nothing that night. She put Elijah to sleep. She lay beside Daniel. But she did not sleep. She stared at the ceiling and thought about Sasha's shoes. About the restaurant. About the life those women were living. And she asked herself a question that would become a slow poison: is this really all there is for me? That question planted itself deep inside her. And from that night, it began to grow. Zara began meeting her friends more often. At first, it was twice a week. Then every other day. She told Daniel she was going to the market, to visit a neighbor, to check on something in town. She smiled when she left and came back distracted. Slowly, the laughter that once lived in their small home became less frequent. She stopped sitting with Daniel in the evenings. She stopped sharing the little meals they cooked together. She started looking at everything in their life through a new pair of eyes that only saw what was missing, never what was there. Daniel noticed. He always noticed. He was not a dramatic man, but he was a feeling one, the kind of man who reads a room without making noise about it. He waited until Elijah was asleep one night and he sat beside Zara and held her hand. "Talk to me," he said simply. "Something is not right with us." Zara pulled her hand back slowly. She told him she was fine. She told him she was just tired. Daniel looked at her for a long moment, the way a man looks at someone he loves when he is afraid of losing them, and then he said, "Zara, I know we don't have everything. But I am working. I am not stopping. Please don't give up on what we are building." His voice did not beg. It only stated the truth. But Zara had already stopped hearing truth. Her grandmother called her one morning and sat her down under the mango tree, the same tree where she and Daniel had first spoken. Mama B did not shout. She did not lecture. She only told a story, the way old women always do. She told Zara about a woman in the village long ago who chased a beautiful bird deep into the forest. The bird was colorful and fast. The woman ran after it, leaving her home behind. But the deeper she went, the darker the forest became. And when she finally caught the bird, it disappeared in her hands. And when she turned back, she could no longer find the way home. "The bird is never the treasure," Mama B said quietly. "The home is." Zara stared at her grandmother, then nodded. But she had already made up her mind. The bird was calling her. And she intended to chase it. The truth about her friend's lifestyle began to reveal itself in pieces. The money they spent did not come from clean work. There were men involved, dangerous men, dark arrangements, things that happened behind closed doors that Zara was not supposed to ask about. But by the time she understood this fully, she had already convinced herself that it didn't matter. She had already told herself that she was different. That she was smart enough to take what she wanted without getting swallowed. She was wrong. But she would not know that yet. For now, all she could see was the light at the entrance of the forest. She had not yet walked far enough to see the darkness inside. It happened on a Tuesday morning. Elijah had been crying from early, the kind of tired cry that young children do when they want their mother's full attention. But Zara was not present even while she was still in the room. She sat on the edge of the mat with a faraway look, not rocking the child, not singing to him, not reaching for him. Daniel came in from outside, picked Elijah up without a word, and held him against his chest until the crying slowed. He looked at Zara. Zara did not look back. Then the argument started, not from nothing, but from everything that had been building for months. Daniel said she had changed. Zara said she was tired of this life. Daniel said they could build something better together. Zara said she did not want to wait anymore. Daniel spoke about their son. Zara said she needed to live her life first. And then the words came out, words that once spoken, cannot be unspoken. "You are a poor man, Daniel," she said, her voice sharp and flat. "I did not study for years to come and eat Gary and suffer with you. I deserve better than this. I deserve better than you." The room went completely silent. Elijah had stopped crying. Even the air outside seemed to stop moving. Daniel did not shout back. He did not throw things. He did not cry. He stood very still, the way a strong tree stands when the wind hits it, and when he finally spoke, his voice was low and steady. "If you leave this house today, Zara," he said, "do not come back expecting to find what you are leaving behind." It was not a threat. It was a promise. Not the bitter kind, but the quiet kind, the kind that comes from a man who has decided to let go of what will not stay. Zara looked at him one more time. She looked at Elijah. The little boy was watching her with those wide, trusting eyes. She picked up the bag she had already packed the night before. And she walked out of the door. Elijah cried out, "Mama! Mama," as she crossed the threshold. His small voice followed her down the path. Neighbors watched from their doorways. Old women shook their heads. Children stopped playing. And Zara walked, fast and straight, without turning around. Not because she did not hear her son's voice, but because if she turned around, she knew she would stay. And staying was the one thing she had told herself she would not do. She disappeared around the corner. And just like that, the woman who had once laughed over Gary and danced at a simple wedding was gone. If this story is touching you already, take 1 second to subscribe and join this family. Stories like this are not just for entertainment, they are lessons we all need to hear before it's too late. For the first few months, life felt like everything Zara had imagined. She moved into a shared apartment with Sasha and the others in the city. There was always money flowing, always somewhere to go, always something new to buy or eat or wear. She sent no message to Daniel. She did not ask about Elijah. She told herself that guilt was just fear wearing a mask, and she refused to wear it. She posted pictures in her mind of a new version of herself, a free woman, a chosen woman, a woman living on her own terms. But the cracks began to appear quickly. The men who funded the lifestyle were not generous out of love. They were generous out of control. They expected things in return, things Zara had not agreed to, things she was not prepared for. When she resisted, the atmosphere changed. The laughter became conditional. The money became a rope. Sasha and the others, who had seemed so powerful and free, revealed themselves to be just as trapped, only deeper in, and longer accustomed to it. Zara began to understand that what she had mistaken for freedom was actually a cage with a beautiful door. Things grew dangerous. There were nights she could not sleep. There were men who came and went like shadows. There were moments she was asked to do things she could not allow, and moments when her refusal cost her safety. Bola disappeared one day and never came back. No one explained where she went. Nobody asked. The silence around Bola's absence was more frightening than any explanation could have been. Rita got sick and was turned away from the apartment when she could no longer contribute. Sasha became cold, calculating, and unpredictable. One night, Zara came home to find her things outside the door and the lock changed. Just like that. No goodbye. No explanation. That was the nature of the life she had chosen, built on nothing real. It collapsed without warning. She slept in a bus park for 2 nights. She ate once a day. She sat on a concrete bench with her bag on her lap and watched the world rush past her, people with places to go, with people who loved them, with homes to return to. And for the first time since she left, Zara allowed herself to remember. She remembered Elijah's small hands. She remembered Daniel's voice saying her name in the dark. She remembered Mama Biye's story about the woman and the bird. And she put her face in her hands and cried, not the delicate kind of crying, but the deep, broken kind that comes from somewhere below words. She had caught the bird. And it had disappeared in her hands. Back in the village, Daniel did not collapse. He had no permission to. There was a small boy who woke up every morning calling for his mother, and that boy needed his father to stand upright. The first weeks after Zara left were the hardest of Daniel's life. Elijah would not sleep easily. He would cry in the night and reach for someone who was not there. Daniel would lie beside him and hold his small body close and whisper that everything was okay, not because it was, but because a father's voice is sometimes the only thing that holds a child together. He told Elijah that his mother had gone on a journey. That she would be back. For a while, he believed it himself. He kept her things folded neatly in the corner. He lit the lamp in the window at night out of habit. But slowly, the folded clothes became just fabric, and the lamp was turned off for good. Daniel made a decision in his heart, a quiet, final decision. He would not wait. He would not waste his pain. He would build. Not for Zara. Not even for himself. He would build for Elijah. That became his entire mission. He expanded his trading business. He studied other traders. He watched how goods moved, where the demand was, what people needed most. He saved every coin he did not need to spend. He made connections. He was honest in every deal, and people trusted him because of it. Year by year, his business grew. The small table in the market became a store. The store became a store. The store became a name people knew. Men who once passed him without a second glance began to greet him with respect. Women who once pitied his situation began to see him differently. And through all of it, Elijah grew at his side, watching his father walk, learning from him without being taught. Then came Grace. She was a teacher who had recently moved to the village. She was quiet and steady and had a way of sitting in a room that made everything in it feel calmer. She met Daniel through a mutual neighbor and was drawn not to his growing success, but to the kind of man he was, the patience he showed, the way he spoke to his son, the way he never rushed to impress anyone. They took time. Neither of them was in a hurry. But love, when it is real, does not need to be rushed. Grace became part of their lives gently, first as a friend, then as something more. She did not try to replace anyone. She simply showed up, consistently and completely. And Elijah, who had grown to be a thoughtful and serious boy, looked at Grace one evening and said, "You feel like home." Daniel heard him say it. And he knew then that healing had arrived. 7 years is a long time. Long enough for a boy to grow into a young man. Long enough for a struggling trader to become a respected businessman. Long enough for a broken woman to be completely undone by the life she chose. When Zara finally made her way back toward the village, she looked nothing like the woman who had walked away from it. She was thinner. Her eyes carried the weight of things she could not speak about. Her clothes were clean but simple. There was no designer bag, no phone, no signs of the life she had once chased. She walked slowly, as if her feet remembered the path even though the rest of her had tried to forget it. The village had changed. Or maybe she had. New buildings stood where she remembered open fields. Children she didn't recognize played in the streets. But the mango tree was still there, and that made something rise in her chest. She stood under it for a long moment before she continued walking. People recognized her. Some said nothing. Some greeted her quietly. An old woman she used to know looked at her, shook her head slowly, and walked away. Zara understood. She had not come back expecting a celebration. She had come back because she had nowhere else to go, and because there were two names she could not stop hearing in her sleep. When she finally stood at the gate of Daniel's compound, she almost didn't recognize it. It was a proper house now, painted, neatly kept, with a small garden at the front and a vehicle parked to the side. Children's shoes were at the door. She could hear sounds from inside, the sound of a meal being prepared, of soft conversation, of a life running quietly and steadily. She stood at the gate for a long time, holding it without pushing it open. Everything she had left behind was still here. But it had healed itself. It had moved forward without her. And now it stood before her like a mirror, showing her exactly what she had chosen to give up. She pushed the gate open. Grace saw her first, and recognized her from the old photograph Daniel had once shown her, not out of love, but so she would know the truth of his history. Grace did not panic. She went inside and told Daniel. He came to the door and stood there looking at Zara for a long time without speaking. He was not the same young man. He was broader, calmer, with a steadiness in his face that had not been there before. He did not invite her in immediately. He did not turn her away. He simply looked at her, the way a man looks at a chapter of his life that is over, and waited for her to speak. Zara opened her mouth and the words came out in pieces, broken by the weight of everything she was carrying. She said she was sorry. She said she had been wrong. She said she had been foolish and selfish and blind, and that not a single day had passed without regret. She said she knew she had no right to ask for anything, but she was asking anyway. She wanted to see her son. She wanted to look at Elijah's face and tell him that his mother was sorry. That she had made the worst mistake a mother could make. And that if he would only let her, she would spend the rest of her life trying to make it right. Daniel listened to every word. He did not interrupt. He did not harden his face or raise his voice. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, simply and without cruelty, "Zara, I forgave you a long time ago. I had to, for my own peace. But forgiveness does not rebuild what was torn down. I have a wife. I have a home. I have a life that was built with my own hands, and with the hands of a woman who chose to stay. I cannot give you back what you walked away from. That is not mine to give anymore." His voice carried no anger. Only truth. And truth, Zara was learning, can be the heaviest thing in the world. Then Elijah came to the door. He was 17 now. Tall. Serious-faced. With his father's steady eyes and a composure that came from years of watching Daniel move through difficulty with dignity. He had heard everything from inside. He stepped out and stood beside his father and looked at Zara. She looked back at him with a flood of emotion rising in her face, trying to find in his features the baby she had left behind, trying to locate herself in the shape of him. "Elijah," she whispered. His name broke on her lips. She reached out one hand toward him. He looked at her hand. Then he looked at her face. And in a voice that was quiet and measured, not angry, not dramatic, just heartbreakingly calm, he said, "I'm sorry. I don't know who you are." He was not lying. He was not being cruel. He meant it the way only a child can mean something that an adult taught him, not by saying it, but by being absent. Zara had not been in his dreams. She had not been in his memories. She had not been in the stories Daniel told him, because Daniel had chosen to let her go rather than poison his son with bitterness. Elijah had grown up with Grace's voice reading to him, Daniel's hands lifting him, his own heart deciding what family meant. And in that definition, in every version of it he carried, Zara was not there. She had removed herself from his story so completely that she had become a stranger. And now she stood before him like someone knocking on a door they had locked from the outside. Zara walked back out of that gate alone. The mango tree was still there. She sat beneath it, the same tree where everything had begun, and she let it all come. She cried until she had nothing left. She did not lose her family because Daniel was poor. She did not lose her son because life was unfair. She lost them because she had chosen to walk away from real love in search of something she could not even name. And the world, which does not pause for regret, had simply continued on without her. The village was quiet around her. The sky above was wide and still. And Zara, sitting alone under the tree that had witnessed her beginning, finally understood what her grandmother had known all along: the bird was never the treasure. The home was. And she had left it with her own 2 feet, of her own free will, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, and no amount of tears could ever walk that moment back. If this story taught you something, don't just scroll away. Hit subscribe, because the next story might be the one that saves someone's life, relationship, or future. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were Zara?